It's the same question whether you're covering City Hall, the State House, the White House, or a war halfway around the world. Can a beat reporter be aggressive when having to deal with the same sources week after week, or do you invariably come to identify with them, even protect them? The question was underscored on last week's program when I talked to Michael Hastings about his Rolling Stone article, the one that got General Stanley McChrystal fired, and got a very different view from CBS's Lara Logan.
This is actually an interesting journalistic point. There's a reason why when General McChrystal took the job, everyone writes a glowing profile of him, because then that assures access later on.
He talked about his manner as pretending to build an illusion of trust, and he's laid out there what his game is. That is exactly the kind of damaging type of attitude that makes it difficult for reporters who are genuine about what they do. I think that's insulting and arrogant myself.
So how does a journalist strike the right balance, especially in a war zone? Joining us now, Jamie McIntyre, former senior Pentagon correspondent for CNN, who now blogs on military and media issues at lineofdeparture.com. And in Kansas City, Fred Francis, former NBC Pentagon and national security correspondent, who now helps teach military officials, among others, how to deal with the media. Jamie McIntyre, you write that there's a dirty little secret among beat reporters who routinely travel with top military officials, an unwritten code. What is it?
Well, generally speaking, you know, the standard position for most reporters in most situations is everything's on the record, including what we're saying now, unless we specify otherwise. That kind of flips when you're traveling in the actual inner circle of senior officials, where the general rule of thumb is most of the stuff that goes on, in particularly after hours and social situations, is off the record unless you specify that you want to put it on the record. And that's what I think surprised a lot of people about Michael Hastings' article, was that he seemed to be able to waive all those ground rules.
Well, he insisted that there were no off-the-record ground rules, but let me go to Fred Francis. Have you, in your reporting days, when you were at the Pentagon, when you were in war zones, did you let things go unreported because of any kind of understanding you had with the brass?
Sure, and it's an unwritten understanding. It's an unspoken understanding. If you're a beat reporter, you need to have things go unwritten, unreported, because you want access. You want access for your audience. It informs your reporting in the long term. If a general officer, there's a gaffe or he says something that is impolitic, you let that go as a beat reporter because you're there for years and years. You know, you're not a lapdog. You're not an attack dog. You're a watchdog. And that's what makes you an effective journalist. So yes, you know, Jamie's right. You do let some things go, but it's for the greater good.
But in letting things go, and I'll come back to Jamie, Michael Hastings, for example, says that people like you, your colleagues who now do this full time, are protecting these guys.
Well, you know, there's a, you know, first of all, what I tell a lot of these people is, you know, there's this idea that if it's off the record, you're never going to ever report it. That's just not true. And the senior commanders and these officials, they know that. They know there's things that they can't even say off the record, because if it's good enough, it's going to get reported. I mean, I can think of 100 examples of egregious things that could happen in an off-the-record situation that I would be bound as a reporter to report. But in those cases, I go back to my source. I say, look, I can't ignore this. I'm going to have to report it, or I'm going to have to confirm it somewhere else. And there may be a price to pay for that. That person might not deal with me.
I disagree. I disagree with Jamie there. I know what he's talking about. You know, sometimes if a general officer or a senior official says something that's so outrageous, so egregious that you have to go back and say, I know that was off the record, but I'm going to report it anyway, and I'll pay the price down the road. I disagree with Jamie. Once you say it's off the record, it is off the record. That's the rule. Unwritten, written, it's off the record. And that's what makes you a valuable reporter. And it's not just at the Pentagon, it's at the Justice Department, it's at the Senate, and it's certainly at the White House. And it's certainly at the Washington Post, Howie, and you know that.
Jamie?
Well, you know, again, I could come up with a scenario. Let's say you're in an off-the-record situation and you witness a war crime.
That's illegal. That's different. That's a breaking of law.
Okay, so Fred, there's the illegal exception. I would point out that making contemptuous remarks about the commander-in-chief is illegal in the U.S. military. It's a violation of the U.S.
Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, it's illegal, but we're talking about breaking a law. Listen,
let me jump in because I want to move this slightly, and let me also just say, speaking for myself, when somebody tells me something off the record, I absolutely positively can't use it, but I can go talk to 10 other people and try to get somebody to say it on the record or in background or in some form that I can get it in the newspaper. Jamie McIntyre, you took on Lara Logan on your blog about her appearance on this program, and you said that she had grievously wounded the press corps with misaim-friendly fire. You went on to say that Logan had reinforced the stereotype of embed reporters who are in bed with senior military officials. But I don't see that much difference between your telling me there's an unwritten code and her saying there's an unspoken agreement not to report everything you see in a war zone.
Well, she's right about that. And in my blog, I said she was right about a number of things in that interview. But what the most damaging thing she said was when she made the comment disparaging Michael Hastings by referring to the fact that he hadn't served his country the way the military did. The problem with that comment is, and I appreciate the sentiment of appreciating the sacrifice of people in the military. Anybody who covers the military gets that. But it feeds this perception. That comment fed this perception that we're more interested in protecting the members of the military than pursuing aggressive journalism. And in that sense, it was a very damaging comment to make.
Nor do you have to have served in the military to be
absolutely not
a fair and effective journalist in a war situation.
Right. I mean, it was just a really bad argument to advance. And again, it just fed that negative perception.
Go ahead, Fred.
You know, listen, Howard, you know, at my company, 15 Seconds, we teach our clients, many of them general officers, never, ever go off the record unless you're with a reporter that you have a long-standing relationship with. Never, ever do an interview with a reporter that you don't know that reporter's background. Do the research. And never, ever do an interview that's longer than 20 or 30 minutes. If you let me root around in your head for a couple of hours, a couple of days, you're not going to remember what you told me.
Especially if there's drink.
So the general, what I'm saying, Howard, is General McChrystal, this was entirely his fault, regardless of what Hastings, and I disagree with many of the things Michael Hastings said or did.
Nobody's letting McChrystal off the hook. Clearly, who knows what he was thinking in allowing all of that kind of access night and day. But here's the question. The argument, Fred, is that Michael Hastings is this freelancer. He's not a member of the club. He comes along, and if he didn't violate off-the-record restrictions, which he says he didn't, he blew the whistle on General McChrystal in a way that none of the beat reporters would.
And I agree that that's what he did, and I agree that he did the right thing. You know, I mean, if they're going to allow somebody from the outside, especially from somebody with his background and from a publication like the Rolling Stone, to hang around a military headquarters for that long, you know, they deserve what they get.
And the other thing,
just not very smart.
The other thing that Fred ought to be telling his clients is that whether they're on the record or off the record, they should not be saying things that they don't want to see show up somewhere, because off the record is not a blanket protection against any kinds of misdeeds or wrongdoing. It's simply not.
But what about this whole question, Jamie, of access? By not reporting things that you think are unnecessarily gratuitous, people joking around, off-color banter, all of that. What do you get out of it? How does it help your reporting other than maybe you get a leak on something that's half an hour before it's going to be announced?
Well, the most insulting thing that Michael Hastings said was that reporters like me and Fred in his past, that we write favorable stories in order to ensure access. We don't write favorable stories. We write stories that we consider to be accurate, that have context, that are balanced, that are going to be seen as fair. And as Lara Logan, I think, rightly pointed out on your program, she's done a lot of hard-hitting stories. That hasn't blunted her access. What the military's not looking for, they're a free ride. They're looking for a fair shake. And if you can show them that even though you've been very critical of them, you've been fair, you can keep getting that access.